All right, welcome into our day 2 reactions on the PFF NFL show. We have the NFL Scouting Combine. We have Trevor Sikkema, which means we are good to go. And we've got news today. Things actually happened.
We do.
Which makes a difference from a day ago. Let's start with the top billing from the news. L'Jarius Sneed is going to get franchise tag. The Kansas City Chiefs are going to use the franchise tag on him, which has several ramifications. Number one, means they're not going to use it on Chris Jones.
Right.
We'll get to that in a few minutes.
Right.
But also attached to that was the report that they're not just tagging Sneed to keep him around and get a long-term deal done and buy time. They're potentially tagging him to trade him and to move him on and allow him to explore the market. So I guess the first thing is, what do you make of that move, and who's going to be the trade partner?
Yeah, I think it's obviously interesting. They want to get a more long-term deal done with Chris Jones. So the fact that they're not kind of keeping that franchise tag to tag him, to me, that makes sense, because I feel like you'd want to be more flexible with a lot of money that you're going to have to pay him. You have a little bit more control when you're able to get something done long-term. And I think that they want to do that with Chris Jones. Not that L'Jarius Sneed's a bad player. I think that he's a fantastic player. And I think the part of this conversation that I want to have with you when we talk about potential teams that could trade for him, because let's face it, every team in the NFL wants good corners. So, in theory, every team in the NFL would want a L'Jarius Sneed.
Right.
But what is the price going to be? Do you feel like it's going to be that maybe back half of the first round or early second round type of a pick, maybe like an early second round or something? How high do you think the compensation is for him there? Because that's the first part of the conversation. And then the other one, where you can narrow down some suitors, is cap space, obviously.
Yeah, I feel generally when we talk about first-round picks, that we're talking about future drafts where they're all kind of the same, right? We're talking a first-round pick, and we think of that as the middle of the first round. But now the draft is weeks away, and several teams are not in that position. The Giants, I'm sure, would love a cornerback, but their first-round pick is number 6 overall.
They're not going to trade that.
Right, so they're not giving that away for a guy like L'Jarius Sneed. So I think you're right. In this specific example where we are talking about a guy or the draft that's upcoming, it sort of tops out in the middle of that first round. But I think that's also probably what the Chiefs are looking for, is that first round pick somewhere in the middle, maybe the bottom of the first round. And then if you are a team like the Giants or somebody like that, Arizona, that wants to spend, maybe you're trying to package something that's equivalent to a middle first round pick rather than using your top first round pick on it.
Right, yeah. So I think that we're probably in that same category. I wonder if he's talented enough, I think, to get traded for a back-end first-round pick. But I wonder if just the contract situation of having to deal with the sign and trade part of him being on the franchise tag, and then knowing that if you are spending such a high pick on him, you're not going to do that for like a rental. So okay, well, now you're talking about, okay, now we have to sign him long-term after this. So I wonder if it's going to be closer to a second-round pick. If it's a late second-round pick, probably a late second-round pick, and some other draft compensation, whether it's a future selection, an early, day 3 pick. But if it's an earlier second-round selection, then maybe that's just enough to get the deal done for some teams. But to me, I'd kind of be shocked if he gets a first-round pick, just because of all the money that would have to come with him being on the tag, and then the money that you got to commit to him to make that trade work.
Yeah, I kind of view it the way that the Eagles and the Titans trade with A.J. Brown is, though. Like, if you're already in the cornerback market, if you're a team right now that's being mocked a first-round corner, this should be of interest to you, right?
Sure.
It's more costly.
Sure.
You have to be willing to do the contract as well, and you're probably going to have to make him like the best-paid cornerback in the NFL. But you are getting an elite level player at a position that's clearly of need. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking about you in terms of drafting these corners. So
right.
I think that can push it definitely into the first round. I think there's a lot of these teams that are picking in the back half of the first round for whom it makes a lot of sense. In particular, I mentioned Arizona before. They have a top pick in the top 5 picks, their own pick, but they have that Houston pick that ended up being number 27 overall.
Sure.
Arizona needs defense desperately everywhere. So Arizona could be a team that brings in a L'Jarius Sneed, who isn't just good. I mean, that's one selling point to him, but he's incredibly versatile. Like, he can play well in man schemes, zone schemes. I think he's probably a little bit better as a man-to-man corner, but he fits every defense in the league, and he can play in the slot, out wide. Like, he's a perfect fit for any team.
Yeah, and Arizona is interesting as well, because they draft Garrett Williams last year, who I like when he's healthy, so I like that him being on the roster, but I'm not so sure he's going to be a CB1 for you.
Right.
And Arizona is also very interesting because, okay, you mentioned they have that number 27 overall pick. They also have 35 at the beginning of the second round. They have 3 third-round picks and then a fourth-round pick as well, so a ton of flexibility there. They also have a good amount of cap space. I believe they're top 10 in the NFL when it comes to effective cap space that we're projected to have from them. And so they're definitely in that conversation. I think Arizona could be a potential target for them. Some other spots, Detroit is a team that has a decent amount of cap space as well. I think we continually mock cornerbacks to Detroit in all of our mock draft. They're sitting there at number 29, so maybe that could be worth it for them. And that's a team who I could see paying more of that premium draft capital price because they are in that winning window, right?
Sure.
That is one of their few roster holes that they have left, and they really have an opportunity to take a stab at the Super Bowl next year. So I think that adding a player that is experienced in that realm, that is a Super Bowl champion and a versatile dude like L'Jarius Sneed makes a lot of sense. So Detroit is also some team that I would throw out there. What do you think about, here's one that's very interesting, because when you were talking about teams that we mock corners to, what do you think about Indianapolis? Because Indianapolis, they're picking at 15, and I think that's kind of high, but they really need a corner there. They have the cap space to do it. The Colts have the 5th most projected effective cap space according to Over the Cap. And so is that a team, like, is 15 too high? Because their second round pick is 46, and if you're doing 46, then you probably got to do 46 and something else. But we think they're going to take a corner as an option at number 15. What do we think about that?
Yeah, it is potentially a little bit high in the draft pick, but you can also balance that a little bit, with playing around with late round picks that come back in either way. You can move the value of it a little bit. So even if you're giving up 15, you're getting a later pick back, and the overall sort of chart is going to put that down a little bit. The first thing to do if you're going to determine whether or not the Colts are interested is fire up L'Jarius Sneed's measurables and find out if he is a 99th percentile athlete. Otherwise, they're immediately out, right? As it happens, it turns out we're in luck, right? 93rd percentile broad jump, 95th percentile vertical jump, 40-yard dash, 95th percentile. He's exactly the type of athlete that the Colts are interested in. So that's a good shout. I like that one.
Yeah.
Let me throw 2 more teams at you in terms of precedent. The Philadelphia Eagles, the team that made that A.J. Brown trade and decided we need wide receiver. They've got enough to make it happen. We needed a wide receiver. We're going to spend a first-round pick on our wide receiver. That's how we're getting it done.
You're right.
We need a cornerback now. Let's go spend a first-round pick on a cornerback. Let's make it happen that way. And then the other team with precedent, the Los Angeles Rams finally have a first-round draft pick and a need at cornerback. So let's trade it away
try to get him to trade it away?
Yep. Let's do it.
No, I mean, I don't love those two. I see where you're coming from. Obviously, I think there's potential there. The Eagles won. I know how he did do this with A.J. Brown,
right?
Is he going to do that for 22 to pay Sneed and then give him a bigger contract? I don't know, man. I just don't know if he's going to do it.
It fits.
They have done it before, so it's hard for me.
They've done it before, but it also fits the way they treat roster construction, right? They pay the valuable position.
It's true.
Right? So
it's
trenches,
true.
cornerback, wide receiver. Don't spend on linebacker, running back, safety. It fits with what they want to do, and with the way Bradbury had his season last year, the massive decline, Slay getting on. It makes some sense.
Right. I think. In my heart, you say Philadelphia, and I go, no, they're not going to do that. But then in my head, like you said, I have to think about, they've kind of already done this. They've actually already made this move. So Philly is definitely a shout out there as well that I think could be a potential. I think people are going to, in the comments, are going to talk about Baltimore.
Right.
I don't think Baltimore has the cap space to be able to do it. Sure, the late first-round pick fits, but
when you factor in that they are likely to tag Justin Madubuike,
right,
which is going to take a sledgehammer to their salary cap.
I don't think that they're going to. I don't think they're going to be able to make this move, even if they wanted to. What about the Niners? Where's the Niners cap space? They got to be close to the cap floor.
They are
right?
currently over the
salary
so
cap. I think the Niners would also.
Right.
I love them. Probably don't have a chance to go get them. So to me, I think Detroit makes the most sense. Detroit's my if I've got a rooting interest, if it's like, yo, he's getting traded no matter what, Detroit would be my go here, and I think it makes the most sense.
So the other side of this whole equation is if they're using the franchise tag on L'Jarius Sneed to create this trade scenario, they're not using the franchise tag on Chris Jones, which means the chances are they're exposing him to the open market. And I know they want him back. He said at the parade that he wants to come back. On the other hand, he's going to listen to what's out there. And if someone else comes in with a ton of money that Kansas City hasn't been willing to give him in the last 12 months, it's going to be hard for him to turn that down.
Yeah, on our free agent projections over at PFF.com, done by Brad Spielberg himself, he's got the projected contract of 4 years, average $30 million a year, which is obviously a large chunk of change. And so I don't know. Every team in the NFL would want Chris Jones, but there's still only a certain amount of teams that I think he would be interested in at this point with signing that would be able to offer him that kind of money. Kansas City, it seems obviously at the parade, he's going to be one of those guys who really wants to go for the three-peat. I think that matters for a lot of these players, and that's going to go into it a little bit. But it's dangerous letting him hit the open market when he is such a game wrecker. You know that some team is going to come in and just give him an egregious offer. And when I say egregious, I don't mean like he's not worth it. He has been in so many instances, but I mean egregious like this is going to set defensive player markets.
It's not helping the price tag.
No,
if you're
not.
Kansas
It's definitely
City
not.
trying to get this deal done, him fielding offers from other teams is not helping you get that deal done.
Yes, right. They'll have to heavily lean on like, hey, there's only one place in the NFL where you can go for a three-peat next year, and it's in Kansas City.
And even, three-peat or not, we have a better chance of winning the Super Bowl than anybody else because we have Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid.
That's true, 100%.
So, yeah, but it's risky, particularly for they've been working at this for a while, right? It's not like this is the first year they've sort of had the contract impasse. Like last year it happened again. So I feel like that's just even more risk to allowing that to happen. And then if both those things happen, right, you trade away L'Jarius Sneed and then somebody comes in with an offer that Chris Jones can't turn down, Kansas City ends up with their two best players, arguably on defense, leaving in the same offseason.
Yeah, all of a sudden that changes the future Super Bowl odds, right? Because for as unbelievable as the combination of Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid are, and I think that they'll still continue to be phenomenal going into next year, the story of how Kansas City was truly able to survive the gauntlet that they did throughout the playoffs was in large part because of what they had on the defensive side of the ball. Now, Mahomes and Andy Reid obviously took care of business, but what Steve Spagnuolo was able to do at defensive coordinator and how he was able to put some of those star defensive guys in great positions, well, without those two players, even without one of them, it's a lot of role players in Kansas City, and you still need stars to really stand out for you. So McDuffie had a fantastic postseason, even up until the Super Bowl. I mean, he was just such a standout player that maybe the reason why you're comfortable letting L'Jarius Sneed leave is because you believe that McDuffie can be that kind of a player. And so if they get a deal done with Chris Jones and they obviously still have McDuffie, then you feel okay if you really believe that he's kind of stepping into that role. Maybe you're drafting another corner that you like at the back end of the first round to kind of replace what Sneed was on that roster. So that's a good out. That's I think the outlook is still fine if you're trading L'Jarius Sneed, but there's no doubt about it. Like, if you trade Sneed, if you lose Jones, that's a massive hit to your three-peat chances.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, particularly when you have a franchise tag to play with and you can therefore guarantee that one of them would be there for a year if you wanted to go that direction. To end up with both of them leaving would feel like a fairly major misstep for Kansas City. Elsewhere in the Kansas City Focus Hour, Marquez Valdez-Scantling was cut, saving, I think, $12 million in cap space, something like that for Kansas City. Clearly puts the focus even more on wide receiver in the draft for them, which it already was given the way their season went. So I guess the easiest way of phrasing this is they picked number 32 overall, the last pick in the first round. Who is the wide receiver that you would put to Kansas City based off what we know right now?
Well, I think the one that I would like the most is Troy Franklin from Oregon, but I don't think that Troy Franklin's going to get there.
That far.
And the reason why I love him in Kansas City spot is because, he did a lot of vertical stuff for Oregon's offense, but you can see in our data the forced missed tackles after the catch, those yards after the catch, the separation that he's able to create early on in his routes. Like, that is something that I think Andy Reid and the rest of that offense can play with really well. I mean, they were able to look at Rashee Rice, and you and I have this exact conversation pre-draft last year that we both kind of liked Rashee Rice, but what he was at SMU was not replicable at the NFL level.
Right.
It was almost like he was going to have to completely change his game. He goes to Kansas City. They saw that as well. And the second he got in Kansas City, he did. They changed what he did, and he became a great short yardage after the catch wide receiver. So when I think about Troy Franklin and everything that he brings to the table, yes, he gives you that vertical offensive piece that you would probably be missing anyways when it comes to consistency and emphasis. Now, especially with Marquez Valdez-Scantling gone, you're going to need to fill that, but he is much more. And I think I would trust Kansas City to see that he is much more. And so I think that he would be a great option for him. Brian Thomas Jr. from LSU, if he is also there, really good vertical threat that we saw this past year in LSU's offense. Another guy who's a little bit different, I wonder if they'd want more size, but Roman Wilson from Michigan. Really great deep threat. I think that he is going to put in a show here at the Combine. I think he's really going to show off his speed. He's a former track guy. His mother was a former track runner as well, so he's got the track speed in his DNA. It's not just him, so it's a long line here. But he's just so explosive. He was able to showcase how he was a great contested catch receiver as well. He's a smaller dude, but he's a very willing blocker, and he's somebody who I just think is a really good football player that, again, I trust Kansas City to use in a lot of really great ways. So those are three receivers that come to mind at 32.
So I hadn't made this connection before, but since you brought it up, we talked before going on the show that Keon Coleman was one of these receivers who I like, and yet when I look at my notes, like 75% of everything I wrote down was bad, right? There's a scary statistical profile. There's a lot of reasons not to like Keon Coleman, and yet I find myself still quite liking him. And actually the last player for whom that was true was Rashee Rice. Like, I liked Rashee Rice, and yet almost all of my notes for him were problematic or concerns or issues. And yet the Chiefs were able to find a player in that, tailor what they want him to do, and end up unlocking the better version of Rashee Rice.
Yeah.
Keon Coleman at number 32
overall. I mean, I've mocked Keon Coleman to the Chiefs, and again, if I'm going to have faith in a team to be able to get the best version out of him, it will be a team like Kansas City. And there's some other teams at the back end of the first round that I think he could be a fit for as well. Certainly the first part of the second round, too, there's a lot of good fits for him there. But I think that when you talk about having a long list of things that you wish were different,
it's not a good starting point.
I mean, it's not a good starting point, but I also think that if you look a little bit deeper, normally that's the case for me in players that I know are really talented. I'm just not seeing it as much.
Right.
So it's kind of like it is a projection thing where you go, I think you're better even than what I am seeing in college, and it feels like you can make a case for that with Keon Coleman. There's a lot of people, myself included, who have been burned by heavy contested catch receivers. I was a big J.J. Arcega-Whiteside when he was coming out of Stanford. He failed. I was Kelvin Harmon guy from NC State. He obviously didn't last. Hakeem Butler from Iowa State. That draft was a lot of contested catch dudes that I loved that just didn't have the nuance in their game to really survive at the NFL level when other players got bigger, faster, stronger than the competition that they were going up against on a weekly basis. I'm not really worried about Keon Coleman being out-athleted at all at the NFL level, but you do have to have that nuance in your game. And so there's no question about it. It's a projection for him. But again, I think that Kansas City, if he lands there, it would make sense for them.
And I do think he has more of that on his tape than people give him credit for. Like, I was actually quite impressed by his sort of late, short area movement to fire into a little bit of space, right? Like,
he just doesn't do it a lot.
Yeah, it's like a hook route. He's between two coverage defenders, and right at the last second, he sort of takes a step into the space to break open more than it looks like he is at the start of the route. So I do think that there's a better player there than there appears to be right now, or that certainly his stats show. And he's obviously capable of spectacular play. So I'm the more I go through it, the more I'm like firmly in my conviction of it makes no sense, but I still like him.
Right.
Okay, the last bit of things to talk about today. What did you glean from the podiums? So we had linebackers and defensive linemen out there today, right?
Yeah.
So what did you hear?
A lot of tidbits. Chop Robinson, the edge rusher from Penn State, says that he wants to run a 4-4 flat.
Whoa.
At what were his measurables? Like 6'4", 250 essentially. He wants to run a 4-4 flat. He said he wants to jump at least 11 feet in the broad.
Wow.
And then between 38 and 40 inches in the vert. And somebody asked him, was like, have you done those before? And he's like, I've hit the jumps in training. So it would be par for the course for another Penn State trench player to test like an absolute alien. So he wants to do that. So he set the precedent very high. So I'm excited to see him when he gets out there. Some other guys that really impressed me. Darius Robinson, the defensive lineman from Missouri, been a fast riser, I think, really since the season ended.
And one of the standouts at the Senior Bowl.
I was going to say, had a really great Senior Bowl. He's somebody who, he played interior defensive line, mostly defensive tackle for about 3 years, played around 305 pounds. I asked him this. I was like, what was your playing weight? He said he played about 305 when he was a defensive tackle. This past year, more as an edge rusher, played between like 280, 285, he said. And, we don't get a lot of time with these players at the podiums, but you do get a little bit of a peer into kind of like who they are, how they handle questions, how confident they talk about football and their game and their teammates and all that kinds of stuff. And that part of scouting is so very important. And teams take it very seriously. That's the most important part of the combine for them. That's why they have the pro day meetings as well. That's why they have the top 30 visits, all that stuff. And from just the 10, 15 minutes that was at Darius Robinson's podium, I could immediately, this dude's genuine, okay? These agents have these guys coached up really well sometimes. They tell them, okay, this is what you say for this question. And a lot of them, they go like, oh, what position do you play? Like, oh, I'm really versatile. I can play anything. I can play anything for any team. But the way that Darius Robinson said it, he was like, I can play anything from a nose to a wide nine. He's like, I don't care. Get me a pair of cleats. Get me on a football field. It's where I want to be. And I genuinely believed him. And he's somebody who I think his floor is so high as a run defender, a player with a ton of strength as a heavy-handed defensive end. He's going to be a first rounder. I think he's a lock for the first round. I also loved hearing Peyton Wilson, the NC State linebacker, talk about just his mentality for the game. He said that he went through medical rechecks, and he believes that a lot of NFL teams believe that his bad injury history is behind him. He had a couple of torn ACLs. He has a separated shoulder, but a lot of those things have healed up. He doesn't expect any of those things to be chronic or like to kind of linger throughout his NFL career. I think he's linebacker one in this class. I gave him a late first, early second round grade. I think he is very clearly the best linebacker in this class, if you ask me. So loved his podium session. Loved Jonah Ellis's podium session as well, the Utah edge rusher. Somebody asked him a specific question. I believe it was Matt Holder from Bleacher Report about his pass rush plan and kind of how he goes about things, because he's a technician, man. He's got a really great pass rush plan. He's got NFL bloodlines. He's got brothers in the NFL already. And he talked about, he just very quickly was like, oh, I build everything off a two-handed swipe, and then I love to go to a spin as a counter. He's like, then, of course, you got to throw in a really good bull rush where you're getting into guys' chests. And it's just the understanding and mastery of pass rushing from Jonah Ellis. You see that on his tape. It was really cool to get to hear him say that out loud. So all of those things, I think, really stood out to me from those podium sessions.
I have a couple of minor red flags from the podiums.
Okay.
Yeah, number one, the same player, in fact, Jeremiah Trotter Jr., okay?
Yeah.
Number one, he's tiny. Really small.
So he is, man. He's little.
He was, we saw him on the podium, and then afterwards, they walked the player somewhere else. Some sort of big media entities tend to get like drive-by interviews of them, just standing somewhere in the media row.
Right.
So I walked right past him, and it was like when the Eagles were in the Super Bowl, and we were like standing next to and talking briefly with Nakobe Dean. And obviously Dean was like a wildly undersized.
Very small.
They're not that different. Trotter's got a little bit more heft to him, but we are not talking about a large individual.
Yeah.
Number two, the man couldn't grasp how a microphone worked. It needs to be near your face. Like if it's not near your face, it was like, so number one, the microphone was pointed directly upwards and like kind of away from him, and at no point did it seem to occur to him that like your voice isn't carrying here, Jeremiah. We're not hearing what you're saying. I'm going to need you to lean into the mic a little bit. And then further down,
mic etiquette, yeah.
I didn't see who it was, but further down there was somebody whose face was like right up on the mic, like inches.
Who was it?
I don't know. I didn't see. Okay. It was just the juxtaposition, the contrast between Jeremiah, who was like 2 feet away from the mic that was not even pointed at his face, and somebody else who was like right up on the thing, making sure you heard every syllable that he was enunciating.
Well, that's important. Communication is important.
Details.
Life,
Details.
Relationships, everything.
Details are important.
Look, for Jeremiah Trotter Jr., he's small, and I have a lot of really good things to say about him as a football player in my scouting notes, but I have him with a third or fourth round grade because he's just small. I mean, Clemson's got him listed at 6'1", 230.
It's so wild.
I bet he's shorter than 6'1", and I bet he's like 225.
Right.
And I think the big problem isn't even necessarily about the weight, which does show up sometimes, but he's got short arms. He goes to tackle, and it's more difficult for him to wrap up because he just has shorter arms.
Well,
so
that's where he's similar to his dad, who was sort of, I mean, I hesitate to use the word stumpy, but was
yeah, but his
compact,
dad was bigger.
Compact.
Yeah,
There
but
we
his
go.
dad was like
His
way
dad was
bigger.
260.
Right. Yeah, his dad was way bigger
Yeah.
than he was. So, look, I think he is so smart. Like, you could tell he's got a Hall of Fame dad, right? I mean, like, at the same exact position. He understands how to read quarterbacks, and he knows where to flow with the defense. He understands spacing, and he is such a smart football player. But measurably, he is going to be such an outlier if he works out. And unfortunately, for as much as I like his tape and as smart as I think that he is, I also think that his smaller measurables show up in how much ground he can cover.
Right.
I don't think he's that fast. So this is just a really smart player who I think has a high floor, but I think the ceiling's a lot lower than people are. Because there's some people who are like, oh, Jeremiah Trotter Jr. is LB1.
Yeah, best linebacker in the draft.
I do not think so. I think that he is LB5, 4 in this class, and I think that that's probably going to spell out either an early day 3 selection, maybe a third-round selection. We'll see.
I'm dropping him at least a round just for the microphone thing.
Okay,
So.
all right.
Anyway, that'll do it for our day 2 recap of the NFL Combine. We will be back again tomorrow, I think, with a larger show after all the news that we've had there. Appreciate it, Trev.
Of course.
And we will talk to everybody tomorrow.